All right, so welcome everybody to tonight's live immigration Q&A. My name is Keelan. I am going to be your moderator this evening, and I'm also a career coach and event coordinator here at Devant. And please welcome Elizabeth Long, who is a barrister, solicitor, and partner at Long Mangalji, and a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She holds a Juris Doctor Law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts with honors in psychology from Memorial University of Newfoundland, and also a Master of Law degree from Osgoode Hall Law School, York University. And one more fun fact, if that is not impressive enough, Elizabeth has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, which is a certification of which only approximately 65 lawyers in all of Canada have. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Elizabeth. We're very, very fortunate to have you go over some recent news in immigrating to Canada and answering some questions.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here as always.
Great. And next slide, please. So just some housekeeping before we officially kick things off. If you have not already noticed, all participants have been muted and there's no need to use your video. So you are welcome to sit back and relax and enjoy. The session is being recorded and it will be shared with you by email tomorrow as soon as we get it uploaded onto the Devant YouTube channel. And as I already said, just a reminder, please, when you're asking questions, you should see the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You can pop your questions into the Q&A tab at any time and we will answer them at the end after Elizabeth has gone through her slides. But please put all the questions in the Q&A tab and not in the chat box, just so it's easier for us to keep track of all the questions. And if you're interested in attending some more Devant events, we host them every single Wednesday. You can find those on the Devant website under our events tab. And once we get started, I will share that in the chat. And if you are unfamiliar with Devant, if you have not attended any of our events before, it is our goal to help international students and alumni stay, work, and succeed here in Canada. And our name Devant actually comes from a French word, which means to get in front of, and that is our goal for you. We want to help you get in front of competition and in front of employers so you can build your dream career here in Canada. And as I said, we host events every single Wednesday on a variety of job search topics. And with that being said, I will pass it over to Elizabeth so she can dive into the legal aspects of living and staying here in Canada.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be here, everyone. And so today, what we're going to go through what I normally go through with every session. We're going to talk about first some things that you need to know while to extend your status, to apply for the postgrad work permit, etc. Then we are going to talk about some of the new announcements that were made last year in December about students. And we'll discuss some predictions that I have about what's in store this year for students. And then we'll talk about some strategies as well for permanent residents. Okay, so first of all, going into extending your status. As temporary residents, international students, international workers, you have a limited amount of time that you're authorized to be in Canada. And you need to make sure that that end date on your study permit or work permit is carefully noted in your calendar. You get many, many reminders. You know exactly when that end date is. Because you will need, if you want to stay in Canada longer than that, you must file an extension before it expires. So let's say you have a study permit and you want to study in Canada, stay in Canada longer than when your study permit expires. If you file your extension before your study permit expires, you can stay in Canada until a decision is made. That's called implied status or maintained status. Now, very important, you can only get implied status if you apply properly. By applying properly, I mean you fill out the right forms, you pay the right fees, and you press the button and it's actually submitted. Okay. As long as those three things are there, you would have applied for your application properly, and you can have implied status, which means you can continue to study in Canada. If you have a work permit, you're applying to work, you can continue with your original work permit status until a decision is made on your application. If you forget, you do have a second chance to restore your status within 90 days of you losing your status. Okay. However, during this time that you are waiting for the restoration decision, unlike if you applied just before it expired, implied status, you can stay until a decision is made. When you're on restoration, you don't have status. So you don't have the ability to study while waiting for the decision. You don't necessarily have to leave Canada, but you can't study or work, unlike implied status, while you're waiting for restoration. Only after you get the final decision, if your status is restored, can you then work or study. Okay. All right. Next, studying and working on your study permit. First of all, actively pursuing your studies is very, very important. If you don't actively pursue your studies, you will lose your student status after 90 days, okay? What does actively pursuing studies mean? It means you are enrolled as a student, you're going to class. There are two exceptions to this rule. One is scheduled breaks. So if it's on your academic calendar that there's a break, you don't have to be in class. You don't have to be there. Okay, that's for everybody in your program. The other thing is authorized leave. Let's say you have some sort of situation where you just can't go to class or be a full-time student. And you can go to the school, you can ask permission from the school to give you authorized leave, okay? It's only if the school gives you authorized leave that you can take the entire semester off, and that won't go against you. If you're on authorized leave, you're still counted as actively pursuing your studies. The authorized leave can only be for one semester, 150 days or less, okay? Working while you're studying. So you can only work while you're studying if you are registered as a full-time student, or in your last semester, they do allow you to be part-time students. Okay. Once you've completed your studies, though, you are no longer a student. Okay. And as such, you have to stop working. So a lot of people think, oh, okay, well, I haven't convocated yet. I haven't gotten my degree yet. I'm still a student. No, you're not. The first indication that the school gives you that you have completed your program, that's when you have to stop working. Okay. Now, if you finish one program, but you're registered for another program, and there's only one semester in between, that's okay. You can work in between those two semesters. Let's say I've completed one program in April, and I've already registered and have been accepted to another program starting in September. Well, that summer between April and September, I can work if it's under 150 days. Okay. Note that when you're on authorized leave, you are not a full-time student. And if you're on authorized leave, you cannot work at all. Okay, part-time, full-time, anytime. Okay, finally, let's talk about your post-grad work permit. The first question you should ask about the post-grad work permit is, should you apply for the post-grad work permit? Okay, you can only qualify for one post-grad work permit in your lifetime. Now, previously in the last few years, the government had these temporary policies to allow students to extend their postgrad work permits for 18 months. That is no longer the case. We're back to the original policy where you cannot extend a postgrad work permit anymore. What that means is you have to be very careful. So if you have, if you attend a program for 1 year, then you'll only get a 1-year work permit at the end. If you do a 2-year program, you get a 3-year work permit. That might be more less risk for someone to be able to get permanent residence, because you need some time to possibly get your work experience, possibly get a job offer, etc. Okay. Now, if you did 2 programs, one with 1 year each, so 1 year plus another 1 year, you can get a 3-year work permit. So sometimes it really depends on whether, it's not just do you qualify for a postgrad work permit, is should you get a postgrad work permit? Sometimes I have students come to me and they finish one program and they're going to go into another program right away, and they just apply for postgrad work permit because they can. Well, if they did that, they probably would have wasted their opportunity to get a postgrad work permit. And when they graduated from the second program, they may not be able to get another work permit. Okay, because you have to qualify for a work permit. You can't just, get a work permit just because you want to get a work permit. Distance education programming, it's supposed to be less than 50% of your program. So make sure that less than 50% of your program is distance education. And finally, in order to qualify for the postgrad, you have to have maintained a full-time student during every semester of your program. Okay, there are some exceptions for authorized leave, and the final semester you don't have to have full-time student status, but otherwise every semester of your program has to be full-time. Otherwise, you don't qualify for a postgrad work permit. All right, now let's talk about when you can apply for the postgrad work permit. Now, the IRCC website tells you you can apply within 180 days after you've completed your program. But I'm here to tell you, don't do the 180 days. That shouldn't be your rule. Your rule should be 90 days or when your study permit expires, whichever comes first. If you apply under those conditions, you can work until a decision is made on your application. Let's look at that a little bit more, okay? Okay, so let's say you have, you're writing your final exams, okay? In that situation, you're still a student, so you can work, okay? Let's say you're waiting for results. Okay, in that situation, you're still a student, so you can still work, okay? Now, as soon as the school has notified you that you've completed your program, at that point, you're no longer a student, so you have to stop working. And then, if you submit your postgrad work permit within 90 days of your program completion and your study permit is still valid, as soon as you submit the application, you can start working full-time, okay? Even if you don't have the work permit in your hand, as long as you've submitted it during that time period, you are eligible to work full-time. All right. Okay, so that's the regularly scheduled programming. Let's talk about a little bit more about, what has been recently announced. So the minister last year in December made some pretty big announcements about students. The first one is for those people who are applying for study permits. Before they had this ridiculous $10,000 for living expenses per year, and they had that for years, and I think they had it for several decades. And it never accounted for inflation. And even if you had 10,000, oftentimes the officers still would reject it. If all you had was 10,000, they would still reject it, saying it wasn't enough. So now the government has raised it to be 75% of LICO. LICO is what the government determines that a normal person in Canada would need in order to, the income that they would need in order to have a minimum level of lifestyle. So what the government is saying, well, you need at least 75% of LICO. For a single applicant. If you have more people, then they add a few thousand more per person for your family members. Okay. So that's the first one. The second one is students who applied for a study permit. So if you held a study permit, or even if you had applied for the study permit before December 7th of last year, you can now work full-time until the end of April. The online study to count towards the length of the program. So normally the online study doesn't necessarily count for the program for postgrad work permits. During COVID, they relaxed the rules, and they are saying, if you study online right now, before September 1st of this year, will still count that online portion towards a postgrad work permit. But afterwards, any program that started afterwards, you have to be very careful. It's no longer going to be counted. And there's no more extensions of these postgrad work permits as well. That's something that, I just discussed. That's the normal rules. And we've always advised people never to count on being able to extend your postgrad work permit. So more than ever, you really do need to have a plan and make sure that if you were to apply for your postgrad work permit, that you can have a good chance to get your permanent residence within that time period. Or if not, how you might want to extend, you can extend your work permit afterwards. All right, so what is in store for international students? For me, it's all about the numbers. In 2023, we had approximately 900,000 international students come. And we have around 700,000 international workers, people on work permits, okay? And so when we talk about permanent residence, we have around 281,000 spots for permanent residence under the economic streams. For I would say most of the 900,000 international students, 700,000 international workers, most people would be competing for 281,000 spots. And of that 200,001 spots, only 110,000 spots are earmarked for express entry. 110,000 into 1.6 million. That's less than around 6 or 7%, right? We also have 110,000 PNPs. And this is including family members. So it's not just individuals who can apply. It's less than 110,000 individuals because it includes family members. So what does that mean? What I think it means is that express entry numbers for the draws are not likely to come down. I think they are likely to stay high as they are. And what is going to happen is even the provincial nominee programs may tighten up more as more people, as there are less spots for express entry, more people are going to turn to the provincial nominee programs. 281,000 spots for 1.6 million people is still not that many. And so really what it means is planning is key. Those people who plan, who can figure out a way early as to how to strategize and how to place themselves in the best position to get PR, those people will tend to be the most successful. So here are some strategies that I have for you guys to get permanent residence. The first one, have a plan, okay? Sometimes it's not just having one plan, it's having many plans. Plan A, if this doesn't happen, plan B, plan C, plan D, okay? You can only go through immigration these days if you have a proper plan. Most people would just, follow and they don't really know what to do. Especially nowadays where the competition for those spots are so high, a lot of them may be left out of the loop. And look for ways to boost your express entry or provincial nominee programs. We can talk about arranged employment points. So for a lot of the students who have postgrad work permits, they don't get arranged employment points. You get arranged employment points if you have an employer-specific work permit that is not an LMIA. If it's not an LMIA, you will need to work in that position for a year. Employer-specific work permits that are not LMIAs can include free trade agreements. So a lot of people who are nationals of countries like Mexico, US, Peru, Colombia, Panama, Chile, UK, Australia, European Union, Japan, and the list goes on of, nationals of those countries. Based on free trade agreements, if you have a job offer under one of the free trade agreements, then we can bypass the LMIA. You don't have to get an LMIA, you can get a work permit. There are other work permits, for example, francophone work permits. If you can, if you're fluent in French to a certain level, even if it's not high skill job, even if it's low skill job, you can get a work permit based on that. If we're looking at LMIAs, oftentimes, the employers may be reluctant to go through the traditional way where they have to advertise and they have to show they can't find a Canadian who can do the job. But we also have other LMIA categories, such as the Global Talent Stream, LMIA, where you have IT workers, STEM workers, who can get an LMIA where the employer, they don't have to go through recruitment, and the process is around 2 weeks. Now, we talked a lot about this in previous sessions for Devant, so feel free to go into that and see some of the different ways we can get work permits that way, okay? Language points are another thing that you can really sometimes just going up by 0.5 on a skill level can be the difference between 90 points, okay? So sometimes it really matters if you study properly for those language tests. Studying. Sometimes maybe you might need to go back and do another program. Sometimes it's not just doing how many programs, it's what kind of programs. Where are you studying? We now have a lot of programs that are regionally based, like the RNIP program or the AIP program, and a lot of provincial nominee programs where they reward people who study in that particular area, okay, in that particular location. So really, we can take a look at that. Sometimes people come and they just don't have the work experience they need to have the points outside of Canada, which can also give you significant points. So I know most people just don't want to leave Canada after they come, but sometimes if you don't have any other choice, especially if your work permit is going to expire, if you leave Canada and work for a year outside of Canada, your points will jump significantly, and then you can apply for permanent residence For example, under express entry, it takes 6 months to get, and then you can come back with permanent residence. Okay. You also need to look at ways to stay in status. Now, since they canceled, the temporary policies on extending postgrad work permits, more and more it's important to look at alternative ways to get work permits. It's not just, people often say, okay, so how do I extend my work permit? The question is not how do you do it, it's can you do it? Okay, and you really now need to qualify for the work permits. So we really need to take a look at the strategies to do that. We need to take a look at your career paths sometimes. Right now, with such limited spots, the government has limited it even more, where they really show a lot of preferential treatment for different kinds of occupations, healthcare, STEM, trades, transportation, etc. Okay, and sometimes it might be worth it for you to sort of switch career paths, even if it's temporarily, just to be able to get selected in one of those occupation-based draws. Okay, so this is our contact us page. If you're interested in coming for a consultation, we always offer our students from Devant a discounted rate to come to us. It's $100. You can come and get your consultation. Just let us know you come from Devant. Also, we are now actively on social media. I didn't put our TikTok and Instagram pages on there, but I can put that. But search us, Long Mangalji, and we are now actively updating on new news on there as well, because things in immigration law just change so much that it's what I tell you today is true today, but really, next week, next month, things are bound to change as well. Okay. We also send out newsletters as well. So we can put you guys who have registered for this, we can add you to our newsletter list. And then, we do send out articles on important changes that can affect a lot of our clients on these newsletters as well. All right, Keelan, let's get started on these questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for all of that info. Very, very helpful and informative. I've also just posted the links to your website and the social media pages in the chat, as well as the YouTube playlist of all of your previous Devant sessions as well.
Awesome.
All right, we have 15 questions. I don't know if we'll get the chance to answer all of them, but I'll work through them in order. And some of them have been posted since the very beginning of the session. So if you've answered some of these, we can just go ahead and skip them.
Oh, I haven't answered anything. I left them for for us
Perfect.
today.
All right. So our first one is an anonymous question. After your PGWP expires, if you do not have enough points to qualify for CEC, express entry, nominee programs, or other pathways, what other options do you have to stay in Canada and become a permanent resident?
That's a really good question. Sometimes we do need to look at ways to boost your points, like I said, or else we can take a look at other kinds of pathways. There's, some of these, that they've listed are some of the most popular ones, but there are so many different programs, RNIP, AIP. We can take a look at whether or not, maybe you have a spouse, and either you get sponsored by your spouse, or maybe if your spouse is also a foreign worker, maybe they might qualify as well. And we can take a look at ways to extend your work permit. We can look at LMIAs, we can look at other ways to get you a work permit as well. But really come for a consultation, and we can provide a plan for you. And we've also had some sessions last year, I think, Keelan, where if you go to the YouTube, we talked about different ways to do it. But these are all general kinds of advice. What I really would suggest is you come for a consultation so we can really go through a good plan for yourself.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is from Navneet. It is in two parts, very specific. If my credential, so they're talking about their, yes, sorry. So if my credential says that I graduated on December 17th, but the credential was issued to me on January 12th, am I eligible to work full time from January 17th, sorry, from December 17th to January 12th?
Yeah. So whatever it says on the letter that you have completed your program, that is the date that you needed to stop studying. Sorry, stop working. You can work again, and even though you don't get the letter until January 12th, so you can't work, you can't submit your application for work, and you can work, you know, even though that's the case, it's too bad, but you still had to stop working on December 17th or whenever, you know, you got it says on the letter that you completed your program. And is the Credential Ontario Graduate same as a completion letter? A completion letter normally is a letter that the school issues to you, and it says that you had completed a program and when, and this is usually the letter that you present to IRCC to get your work permit. But oftentimes, sometimes the schools don't give these letters, and you can give your transcripts and, you know, see, it's best if you have that letter because it's more clear, but sometimes you don't. But as long as you have something to show that you completed your program and also what kind of program it is, usually they do now want the transcripts, to see the transcripts.
Amazing. Thanks, Elizabeth. The next question is from Ivy. She says, I have been working as a customer service representative for the last 2 years in Canada. While creating my Express Entry profile, there's a section about work where it asks if I have a job offer in Canada. I tried to fill up the section by answering yes, but in the following question, it then asked for an LMIA number, which I do not have. Since I was unable to proceed with this section without the LMIA, I decided to go with answering no. Did I do it right?
Yeah, it's a very specific. Normally what we do is if you have a job offer, you have a job offer. If you don't have an LMIA, you answer no, that you don't have an LMIA, and there's specific questions on that. I would also say customer service representative, most of the customer service representatives, that's a low skilled position. So there might be some issues even qualifying for Express Entry. Do come for consultations so that we can have a proper evaluation for you.
Perfect. That's a good segue into the next one, which also talks about tiers. So my dream career is not in tier 0 to tier 3 category needed to qualify for PR. So how can I pursue it and still become a permanent resident?
Well, we can take a look and see if there are other routes based on your career. So for example, there are sometimes different kinds of for example, provincial nominee programs. In Ontario, we have something called the in-demand stream, and a lot of the lower skilled that are not in the high skilled tier 0 to 3, you can get permanent residence based on that. Sometimes it's really a matter of choosing. Do you want to stay in Canada more, or do you want to pursue your career as early as possible, and looking at which goal takes priority?
That's a really good point. All right. Another one from Navneet. Does your study permit or SIN expire on the day when the completion letter or official transcripts were issued?
No, your study permit does not expire on the day that you get a completion letter, but you are no longer enrolled. You're no longer actively pursuing studies when your studies are completed. So 90 days from that date, you lose your student status. That's why I tell you to apply for your work permit within 90 days of completing your studies. Your social insurance number is usually issued to the end of the date of your study permit. You can continue to work under the old social insurance number if you're on implied status. And when you get your new work permit, you can then go to Service Canada and it'll be the same number, but the expiry date will be extended to the end date of your work permit.
Right. Another one about study permits. Zawa says that their study permit is going to expire in September while their course finishes in December 2024. Their question is, should they log their study permit extension, and how many Canadian dollars do they need in their bank account as proof of funds?
Right. So yes, you should file the extension of your study permit. As to how much money, so the amount that the minister announced, that's for 1 year of your studies. Normally, when you're filing a study permit extension, the officer may be a little bit more forgiving than in the beginning when you're applying for a study permit. And I think a reasonable thing to show is if you have pro rata 3 months of so maybe a quarter of the 20,000 or whatnot savings, that's pretty fair to show that you have that amount. They want to show that you can support yourself until the end of your studies, essentially.
All right. Another from Navneet. What is the first indication that the college can give me that my studies have completed?
Well, there's all sorts of ways. Sometimes they send you something on your portal saying, congratulations, you completed your program. Sometimes they send you an email. Sometimes, there's all sorts of ways that schools can do it. And it's not good enough for you to say, well, I didn't check my portal until, 30 days later. No, it's the first time you actually send it to you and you reasonably would have received it. And a lot of times you can see it on your transcripts as well. But usually on the completion letter that the school issues it to you, that's the official time that they have said that you have completed your program.
Right, thank you. This one is an anonymous question. Could a visa visitor or tourist holder request for a change of status? And they said that after having studied for 5 years at U of T from 2014 to 2019.
You can always request a change of status. You just have to qualify for it. Usually if you've studied for 5 years, you normally would have needed a study permit. There are some very, very rare exceptions to the rule. So I need to take a look at your case to see whether or not you were studying legally or not.
Perfect. All right. Another one about bank statements. Can you please talk about the amount of bank statement needed to apply for your spouse as an international student? And what happens when someone starts working before starting school?
So the government has published a list of how much you need financially if you have, a family members with you. I can't remember what the exact amounts are. You can check on the website. And so normally if you have more people join you, then you should show that you have those funds to support your family as well. What happens when someone starts work before starting school? You shouldn't be starting work before you start school. That's not, you can only work after you've been enrolled as a full-time student. So yeah, you shouldn't be doing that.
Perfect. All right. We have a question from Claudia. She quotes, the students who have applied for a study permit as of December 7th, 2023 can work full-time until April 30th, 2024, end quote. If my program has a 4-month pause during the summer before I go back for the second year of my program, does that mean that I can work full-time from now up until the beginning of my 3rd semester? And for context, they are just starting their 2nd semester at Centennial College.
You can only work full-time until the end of April 30th. I don't know what a 4-month pause would mean. If you had a study permit or you applied for a study permit before December 7th, you can work full-time only until April 30th. You can't work full-time beyond April 30th.
Perfect. Okay. An anonymous question. Could someone get permanent residency with 1 year postgraduate work permit?
Sure, depends on the situation. I don't know if you can. Come up for a consult and we'll see.
Perfect. There's a running theme here. Book your sessions with Elizabeth, everybody. All right. How much POF do I need to extend my study permit if I plan to take a second program?
How much funds I think this is. So if you needed to do a second program, you should, and you need to apply for another study permit, you do need to show that you have enough funds to support yourself, and the government has put those funds there. So, you should show that you have enough funds. Or maybe if you sometimes, the officer may be a little bit more forgiving if you do have a job and you're earning some money, or you have parents who are supporting you. But most of the time, I would say it's important that you have those funds. You can see that you can support yourself with the funds that the government has stated.
All right. We have a very broad question. Can you talk about the recent changes to the OINP?
I think what this person is talking about is they recently made an announcement that the international students stream, it used to be that they were very, very selective about the prerequisites for the 1 year, people who had 1 year postgrad certificates. Most of them didn't qualify because OIMP required that the program had a prerequisite that only allowed people who already had a degree to qualify for that international student class. Now the government has changed that so that as long as you have a 1 year Ontario graduate certificate, that will allow you to qualify for the international student stream. If you want to know what the international student stream is, go look at some of our previous seminars that we did last year. We did talk about that in some of the previous seminars.
Perfect. All right. This one is quite specific from Bupati. Welcome, Bupati. I recognize your name. Welcome back. I am going to apply for PGWP. I have completed my 2 1-year programs, which were completed in December 2023. Should I do a medical check if I'm going to work in administrative side of healthcare? 2, should I do a medical check up front or after receiving the request? And 3, I have not received my transcripts from my second program. Can I still apply for PGWP? One more, my study permit is valid up until June 2024, but my visa is stamped as a visitor visa valid up to 2030. So should I apply for a visa after receiving my permit?
A lot of specific questions. So first of all, if you guys are going to work in healthcare, I would certainly do a medical, just to be safe. If you don't do a medical and you want to work in schools or in healthcare, the work permits will state that you are restricted. You're not allowed to work in those fields. And so the employers, when they see that on your work permit, they're not going to allow you to work with them. So do a medical, you don't wait for them. They will not ask you. They will just give you a work permit that restricts you from working in those positions. So if you want to work in those positions, do a medical upfront. You can't apply for postgrad work permit without a transcript. And you don't need a visitor visa to be in Canada. You need a visitor visa if you are from a country that requires visas to enter Canada. So for those people who want to travel, and you want to leave Canada and the US, you can actually go to the US without a visa. But if you, without a visa to come back to Canada, you may need a visa to go to the US, but you can go to the US with just a work permit in Canada to return to Canada. Okay, work permit or study permit to return to Canada. But if you wanted to go outside of Canada in the US and you wanted to return to Canada, you need the visa. Now, what happens is a lot of people, your visas normally correspond with when your study permits expire. So if you want to extend your visa, normally what I would advise is go and extend your work permit first. Then you apply for the visa that's based on your work permit, and it will end at the end date of your work permit.
Okay, amazing. You did an excellent job at answering all those questions. After using my PGWP to work for 1 year, what other options exist for extending my stay or work with this employer?
So we talked a little bit about that with LMIAs, different work permits. Yeah, come for a consultation and we'll see what we can do.
Perfect. How soon can I apply for OINPIS stream? I'm currently taking a 1 year program.
So you can apply for the international student stream as soon as you graduate. You don't need any sort of work experience in order to qualify. Now, again, we can put you into the pool. You still have to wait to be invited to apply by the Ontario government. As long as you have the job offer, though, the proper job offer, you graduated from the qualifying program and you qualify, we can put you into the pool and then you wait for the government to invite you to apply.
All right. We've got about 10 minutes left, everybody, so I'm sorry. I don't think we're going to be able to answer all of your questions.
The questions keep,
I
we're
know.
moving through them and they keep getting more and more.
Coming.
Yeah.
But please book a session with Elizabeth. The contact information is on the screen there. All right. This one is about further studies during the PGWP. So how strict is this? And do trainings, short courses, and other less formal education courses count in these restrictions? And what happens if you're taking courses like this and immigration finds out during your PGWP period?
So there's a misconception that if you have a work permit, you can't study at all. It just says you can't study without authorization, but you are authorized to study in programs that are less than 6 months without a study permit. So you can do that. You can study in distance education that doesn't require a study permit either. It's only programs that are not distance, that are over 6 months in Canada, that you actually need to have a study permit, and then you apply for a study permit. Now, one thing that I do want to warn you guys about studying while you're working is if you are a full-time student in Canada, then the work experience that you get while you are a full-time student doesn't count as work experience for the purposes of express entry. So be very careful. You can do part-time studies, but full-time studies could interfere with you getting those work experience hours that you will need, you may need for express entry.
Great, thank you. Another very specific, are there PR pathways for machine operators?
Machine operators. It depends on what kind of machine operators. Some machine operators are in the in-demand stream for OIMP. Other machine operators, if you're high skilled, if you're technicians, technologists, you might qualify under different kinds of streams for express entry, and that's high skilled, or there may be construction streams. So yeah, there are different kinds of ways. Come and see us, and we can sort it out for you.
Perfect. Is there a max number of years that a study permit can be extended?
Not really. However, if you're a lifetime student, the officer may get a little bit suspicious to see how come you keep, you're not graduating, or you keep wanting to study. But there are some people who just love to study so much. Yeah, so I think it's whatever the officer, if they believe that you actually are going to study. Yeah.
All right. Does PGWP start from the time the decision is made or the time that we apply for it?
Usually it starts from the time that the decision is made. So if it takes 5 or 6 months, you buy yourself 5 or 6 months.
Okay. Rosalind says that her studies will end in April 2024 and she will apply for PGWP while still in Ontario. She's wondering if she can still use that when she moves to British Columbia while waiting for PGWP approval.
You can go anywhere you like. You may want to change your address because they'll be sending the work permit to the address that's on in the system. But yeah, you can go anywhere you like. It's a federal program.
All right. Raul is wondering that during his study permit status, if he can travel back to his home country during breaks or during ongoing classes.
During breaks, yes. During ongoing classes, I don't know how you can attend classes unless it's online, which you need to be careful that, you know, the online component doesn't exceed the 50% of your total. Otherwise, it won't count. You won't qualify for the postgrad work permit.
Interesting. Okay. Can I apply for PR, especially for a health draw, while still studying in an 8-month program? As to practice medicine and PR, you have to have PR.
Yeah. You can always qualify for permanent residence, even if, well, I have a lot of people who qualify for permanent residence who get invited to apply, even if they've never been in Canada. So for express entry, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in Canada in order to get invited to apply and to qualify for PR. So certain circumstances like arranged employment, you might need to, depending on the situation, but yeah, it's possible.
Okay. Rosalind is wondering if they already have an approved PGWP, can she consider looking for a job that will offer an LMIA?
You can always find a job that, but okay, so here's the thing, the jobs that offer LMIA, those you have to be very careful. There are certain kinds of fraudsters in the system where they say, okay, you can buy a LMI, you can pay me $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, I've heard $100,000, and I will give you the LMIA. That is fraud. That is not a real job, and that is against the law. The employer is not supposed to ask the worker to pay them any money for LMIA. In fact, as lawyers, we can't even charge the worker any fees for applying, for representing the employer in applying for the LMIA. The employer has to pay all of the fees for the LMIA, okay? Look for a job that's a real job. Don't look for a job that you know it's fake. That will come back and bite you. And even if you get permanent residence, even if you get citizenship and immigration, and this has been done before, immigration cracks down, they find all the files, they can take away your status. It's really not worth your time and your energy and to do that, okay? Really look for ways to get permanent residence legitimately, and then you don't have to worry. You don't have to lose sleep over things like that.
That's really, really important warning. And actually, we have a event coming up on January 31st, all about trying to identify if a job posting is real or a scam. So that is an important one to come to as well. All right. We have time, I think, for a couple more. This one is quite so specific with dates. I had completed my first program on December 15th, 2023, and their next course is starting in May 2024. Their study permit has been extended until March 2025. So they're wondering between January and April, how many maximum hours can they work?
Okay, so they completed their first program and their next course starts in May 2024. And so in between, so this semester, because you're not working and it's in between the programs, you can actually work full time in between that semester.
Perfect. Okay. I've got a job as a management trainee. Can I show this as experience on my express entry if the job does not have a knock code?
Every job has a knock code. Every job. You have to fit it in one way or another. You gotta like just sometimes these jobs you just gotta push it in. You gotta like see which one it has. Management trainee is probably going to be a manager. As long as you're paid for the job, then we can take a look at what you're doing and somehow push you into one of those knock codes.
Elizabeth also helped with a session a few months ago all about knock into your codes. So I can link that in the chat as well, the recording to that session.
Fantastic.
Okay. If I work as an insurance advisor, would I be nominated for the AOP?
AOP for nomination. AOP. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the AOP stands for nomination. Insurance advisor, I mean, really a lot of these things we need to take a look at the at your specific situation and go from there.
All right. Okay, maybe one or two more. Do I need to have work experience to apply for PR under OIMP, or do I need a work offer letter? And does that offer letter have to be for a field job or even a restaurant job experience? Would I still be eligible to apply?
So there are different kinds of OIMP programs. There's lots of different kinds of OIMP programs. There's one for students that you don't have to have any work experience. Others, you do have to have the work experience. So yeah, do come for a consult. We can sort it out there.
Right, and perfect segue into what will probably be our last question. How much is a consultation fee for people attending this event? And maybe how can they also book that consultation with you, Elizabeth?
Great. So it's $100 if you tell us that you're coming from Devant. And if you email us, that's the best way to do it. Email us at inquiries@lmlawgroup.com. We'll book you in with one of our lawyers who can help you out.